Hi, this is Steve from PixelBump.com, and welcome to the second week of our summer movie extravaganza, where we're taking summer blockbusters that I see every week and then discuss how some of the effects in those films were done. And this week, we're doing Mad Max: Fury Road. And if you haven't seen it, do yourself a favor and go check it out. It is a lot of fun. It is as big and bombastic as you could ever imagine it to be. When I was thinking about what we could talk about from the movie, there are explosions, there are giant sandstorms and tornadoes, but on one level or another, we've already touched on a lot of those subjects. And one thing I really loved about the movie were the matte paintings. It created a larger, vaster, more beautiful, and more expansive world than could exist in nature. And I thought the matte painters did a really good job, and I realized we've never even talked about matte paintings. So I thought that would be a fun one to do this week. So let's take a look at the matte painting I created in the spirit of Mad Max. And you can see it's a larger, bigger image than could ever be shot with a physical lens. And I thought images like this really helped sell this world that was bigger and badder than any world that exists today. So when you look at an image like this, it's easy to become a little overwhelmed, especially if you're not completely comfortable in Photoshop. But the way this image was created is a lot like a jigsaw puzzle. It's just finding pieces that look like they can match, cutting them out, blending them together, color correction, all steps that we're used to in After Effects. So let's take a look at the layers that make up this image. I'm going to go ahead and turn everything off and just bring it back to the first image I saw that said this is going to be the anchor of this piece. And it's this big sky image. And I think this is somewhere in Wyoming, actually. I really just loved all of these clouds. There was a lot of depth to the image. There was a lot of beautiful color, beautiful shape. And when I saw these clouds, I knew that that could be the anchor and basis for my image. So I kept looking around and just kind of doing Google searches until I found more pictures of clouds, because I knew I wanted to fill it out from top to bottom. And you can see that this image, although a beautiful panorama, wasn't tall enough to fill out all the extra clouds. So I went around and just kept finding other images of clouds that I thought had beautiful shapes. You can see I just used a really soft eraser and just started erasing pieces out to kind of blend them together. And I just kept adding little pieces of clouds where I thought the shapes would line up. And when I kind of had all the shapes I wanted, I didn't want to keep adding littler pieces on top of here, but I wanted to fill in all of this. So what I did was I just took the top couple pixels here off the image and just stretched them out just to create a color background. Because if you put that just behind the clouds that you've already cut out, it's going to fill in really nicely. So that was a nice little trick. And then I just threw a very simple photo filter over the top to warm it up a little bit, kind of give it a little more of that outback desert heat. So the next thing I needed to do was start looking at the ground layers. And again, I really just kind of went, okay, I found one piece that was a nice panorama, but again, it's just not tall enough to really fill this whole area out. So I found a second one, and you can see here, it is just very softly erased, a very big soft brush, so that you can't really see where these two images are blending together. Then I found a couple more images and just kind of kept layering in. So I added some pieces back here in the far background, kind of would match up nicely with these mountains in the extreme background. And again, I just wanted to create layers and layers and layers. A lot like these clouds are layered, I wanted layers of land as well. So it just seemed like this image went on forever. And then I had one more set of dunes on this side. Then I put just one little mesa down here. I thought just wanted to add one little extra mesa. And this doesn't look bad, but it really doesn't look like they belong together. They're not in the same world at all. And the way I knew I could fix a lot of that in this image was the use of haze. And I knew that this had to feel dusty and dirty, so I just kept adding really soft gradient hazes over the top. And you can see they just really start blending that image together. These mountains kind of start just fading off into the distance. They become more graphic shape than anything. but it just gives you this impression of a very long, very beautiful, very large and dusty world. The next thing I needed to do was come up with something here for the foreground. And I wanted to do something like they did in the movie, where it's like we're on a plateau looking over the desert. So I found this really nice image that somebody took off the top of a nice desert cliff, but it didn't go far enough. So I just flipped it and resized it a little bit. And you can see it's the exact same image on both sides. And then I found another piece of rock that was similar and just used that as a bit of a blend here in the middle. Just this other rock that had a kind of similar structure right on top, and it blends really nicely together. And that was getting me to a pretty decent space with this image, but I just wanted something a little more here in the midground. Again, just trying to build as many layers of depth as I could. So I started building in some lower cliffs, and just kind of some area here where this large plateau would meet up with the sandy desert. And that just kind of really helped me feel that this was a little more grounded. And then again, of course, a little extra haze never hurt anybody. And then with all of the images in, it was just about adding some layers of color correction. So I wanted to add a little more red down here at the bottom, a little more contrast overall, and just pull down the saturation just a touch. And this gave me the image that we see here. And it's not perfect, but it's definitely good enough for what we need. If I were a compositor and got this image, I would be pretty happy because I know I can make a shot out of it. So let's go ahead, take this image over to After Effects, and we'll start compositing this together that we can use in our desert movie. All right, so here we are in After Effects, and we've brought in our exact Photoshop comp. The only difference is I took all of our layer groups and just compressed them down. I knew I wasn't going to do any more image editing here, and I didn't want to deal with the speed hit of having a pre-comp with a whole bunch of different image files. So I just went ahead and took my close plateau, mid-ground, ground, and sky layers and just, compressed them down in Photoshop before importing them. So if I turn them all off, you'll see we've got the exact same thing. We've got our sky layer back here. We've got our photo filter, haze, our ground layer, more haze, more haze, more haze, our mid-ground layer, more haze, close plateau, and then our color correction layers. So the technique we're going to use to split this up is the exact same one we used in the Visa Go World spot a number of months ago. We're just going to go ahead and grab our layers here and make them all 3D. And I'm going to go ahead and give myself a little more room here and zoom out just so I can see what I'm working with. And I'm going to grab the position of each of these. Now, all of these color correction, actually, let's turn the 3D off on those. Those do not need to be 3D. The same way our photo filter does not need to be 3D. So we'll just go ahead and remove those from the 3D layers. And let's grab our sky and start pushing it back. Now our sky is going to want to be back pretty far, so let's go maybe 2000, and then we'll just scale them on up until we feel it's filling the frame again. And we'll just kind of repeat this with each of these. So maybe 1900 here for the haze, and scale it back up. The ground layer, we're going to want that to be much closer. So maybe we'll say 1000 here, and we'll scale them back up. And then each of these hazes, I'll just make a little bit closer, and a little bit closer, just so there's a little bit of depth to those as well. And then we'll just go scale it up, and scale it up. There we go. And then the mid-ground, let's see, what was our last position on haze there? Is it 700? So let's say this one's at 500, and we'll scale him up. And we'll say this one's at 400. And we'll scale that one up. Now we can push this close plateau a little closer maybe, but we have enough distance there to begin with. So let's go ahead, close all those guys back down and create a camera. And I'm just going to create 50 mil camera and say okay. And I can close up a little bit, and I will see how this is working. I'm just going to try to zoom my camera in and out a little bit, see if that feels fairly natural, which not quite. That ground layer is moving a little too fast for me because this is also far off in the distance. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm going to leave one where it is, and I'm going to push one back maybe about 1500, kind of bridge that gap a little bit. I'll scale him back up until it matches pretty well. And then I'm going to go ahead and take an area here and feather it maybe 150 pixels. I'm going to grab that mask and I'm going to reverse it for the bottom. There we go. And that should give us a little bit more going on there. Yeah, that feels a little better because now those farther mountains aren't moving as fast. And it just gives a little extra layer of depth. In fact, I like that enough that I'm going to do the same thing with the sky. I think I'm going to duplicate that one. And I'll go ahead, turn on Roto Bezier, and I'm going to give myself a nice large mask here. I'm just going to kind of grab some of these shapes that look like they're probably a little closer to camera. So just kind of pull those over. There we go. And I'm going to position them maybe about 1500 as well, and scale them back down. And I'll put a feather of maybe 150 again. And let's see how that works. Yeah, that's nice. Definitely feeling more depth. Yeah, that feels good. You know, we can keep adding more layers to this, keep breaking it up more, but I'm happy enough with this. I think this gives us plenty to work with, and I'm not going to want to zoom too far with it anyway. For a wide shot, I think a little bit of drift is going to work a lot better. So I'm going to set some keyframes here, and then maybe let's just do about 5 seconds. And just a little bit of push in, nothing too extreme. See kind of how that feels. Yeah, that's not bad. It's a little boring, so maybe what I'll do is see if I can kind of cheat over as much as I can. And then when I come over to here, we'll just pan a little bit to the side. See if we can make this feel more like a push-in dolly shot. That should also give us a little more perspective change. Yeah, that feels much better. I like that a lot. That's very nice. All right, so we've got a bit of a 3D move. We've got a really nice image, but it still isn't really coming to life yet. And to do that, we're going to have to add some more compositing layers. And the first thing I think I want to do is start animating some of that haze. We've got all that haze that's really making the image blend, but let's start putting it to work for animation as well. So our first big haze layer back here, I'm going to take a new layer. I'm going to call it the fractal. And I'm going to go ahead and add fractal noise. I don't know how many effects I've built out of fractal noise over the years, but it's a lot. This is just such a versatile little guy. And let's go ahead and see if we can find a noise that looks pretty cool. No. 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 I really would like cloudy to look better, but sometimes it really just doesn't. There we go. All right, there, that's a good look. That's going to work nicely. And let's go ahead and solo it for a second. And for this one, let's just start by animating its transform. So I'm going to create an expression here. I'm going to go open bracket, and I'm going to attach it to the number it currently is for the X position, comma, and I'm going to go time times 50, close bracket. So our X value is the X value it already has, and the Y value is going to be the passage of time times 50. And let's go ahead and see how that looks. And I think that's the wrong direction. I think it should go up. So I'm going to just go ahead and go negative time times 50. And that looks good, but I think it's going to be way too fast. Remember, this haze is off in the distance. So let's try 10. There we go. That might be a good speed. We may want to slow it down later, but not a bad speed to start with. And I'm going to go ahead, put an expression on the evolution as well. And I'm going to use that same time times 50, just so I have a little bit of offset here. And again, that's probably way too fast. So let's try 10 for that value as well. Maybe a little more than that. That doesn't look like it's doing anything now. So we'll try 20. There we go. That, I see the undulation. All right. I'm going to go ahead and preemptively slow this guy down to 7. Just a little slower, I think. There we go. Again, subtle. Subtle's going to go a long way. We're going to have a lot of these layers with animated haze, and I don't want any of them to be too standout. So we'll create that as a Luma matte. And then if we look this over, we can see we have this nice billowing haze happening. And we can see it happening back here as well. There we go, just a little bit of animation. Nice and subtle. Nothing that's going to draw your eye and scream that this is an effect, but just adds another layer of believability to the image. So let's go ahead, duplicate that fractal again. We'll pop it up here against haze 4. And let's go ahead and switch it up a little bit. We don't want these to be exactly the same. So maybe the scale will be a little different. Maybe we'll come down here and we'll change some of our initial offsets. So maybe time, this one will be a little closer. So maybe it moves just a little bit faster, maybe 22 and maybe 8. So we'll have just that little bit of offset there. And we'll change our random seed up. And that should give us enough difference. So then I'll go ahead and Luma matte that one. See how that one looks. That looks pretty good to me. And we'll just keep going. We'll add another fractal here, drop it above haze 3. And again, it's a little closer, so maybe we will transform this one up a little bit. And let's go ahead and come down to our evolution options. We'll change random seed, and we'll go ahead and change just a few of these options here. So maybe 9 and 23. And we'll Luma that one. And we'll check that. Yeah, that feels really nice. I like that one a lot. Let's see how these guys are all playing together. And I hope YouTube compression doesn't completely ruin this, because we are getting a really nice subtle haze effect. It just feels like there's some sandstorms going off in the distance, and that they're very large. We don't have a lot of fast moving sand. It's more like a large sandstorm. So that's great. Let's go ahead and finish this out. We'll add one more for our level 2 haze, and we will maybe go just a little bit bigger, 115, and we will again change the evolution options, the random seed. Let's come down here, we'll go 10 and 25. And once again, a Luma matte. So there we go. Now we've got all our hazes working together with some animation just to make them come to life. Very nice, very nice. Really liking that. Let's see, which haze is that? This is our close haze. Yes, we definitely want this on our closest haze. So let's go ahead, just change our options here to 125. This one's much closer, and we'll give it a different random seed. And let's go 12 and 30. And we'll go ahead and Luma matte that one. You know, that one could actually use a little more punch. So I'm going to go ahead, solo it for a second, and I'm just going to bring up the contrast a little bit more. There we go. Now we should see it a little more pronounced. And again, I'm not looking for it to grab attention. I just want to be able to kind of notice it and accept it as an element in the scene without it being distracting. There we go. There, that's looking pretty good. Now, I think the next thing, I want to do is add a little more contrast to the image. I'm going to just add another set of curves here, just to give it a little more S curve. Just more of that film look. So I'll go ahead and just really slightly, I just want to darken it a little bit without losing too many of those highlights. Just a little more contrast, really make it look a little more punchy. And after that, I'm going to add a little bit of glow to this. And the reason I want to do that is to kind of give the image a little bit to bring together, but I also want it to just feel a little more alive with the light sources. So these light sources feel a little bit more like they're really burning through those clouds. So nice soft glow and a really low intensity. And you can just see it's again subtle, but it really does add something nice to the image. So with those in place, I'm going to go ahead and grab a piece of video here, and I'm going to just throw some grain over the top of it. And I'm going to scale it up a little bit and use an overlay. And this is where we really need to zoom in and do a preview. Let's kind of see what we're dealing with. I think that grain may be just a little too heavy. Yeah, it's just buzzing really, really badly. So I'm going to go ahead and drop it down to like maybe 70% and check it again. So I want it to feel filmic, but I don't want it to feel like it was poorly processed film. and maybe just a little bit more. Let's drop it down to 55. Yeah, that's nice. All right. So we've got all that in, but I think we can even do a little bit more with this. So I'm going to go ahead and create another adjustment layer. And I'm going to call this the heat. And I'm going to grab a turbulent displace, drop it over the top, and you can see it's immediately horrible. But let's go ahead and bring our size way down, and maybe even a little lower than that. There we go. And the amount way down. And now I want to take it. I'm going to put this in between my midground. There we go. And some of the other layers. And I'm just going to grab this area here. And I'm going to feather out a mask. Pretty soft. Maybe 200 pixels. And I'm going to preview that. And all I'm looking to do is just add a little bit of that heat distortion that you would see looking out over the desert. And I think my mask may be a little too soft. I don't think we're getting as much as I'd like. Let's go ahead and bring that up. There we go, seeing a little bit of it now. There we go. So let's just bring this up a little bit more. And a little bit more down here. And that should give us a little better, should give us a better effect. So again, I'm just going to take my evolution and I'm just going to say time times, again, maybe 25. And we'll let this preview and see what we've got. You know, I really think I can actually turn up my turbulent displace a little bit. I'm going to turn it up to 20 and maybe bring the size up just a little bit, just so I can see what's going on. So they're subtle, and then they're subtle, and then there's too subtle where you don't even see it. That's definitely not what we want. There we go. Just on the edge of being noticeable. All right. So I think our scene is looking pretty good, but I'd like to give it a little bit of focus. And I think to do that, I'm going to create some lightning. So I'm going to go ahead, create a new layer. And I'm going to call on the Advanced Lightning plugin. And this plugin usually does not get much in the way of respect. And that's normally because it's a little bit difficult to work with and out of the box doesn't give you really the best results. So what I want to do is come in and just turn off my glow here all the way. And I'm going to go ahead and maybe bring up the core size a little bit, make it a little thicker. Yeah, something like that. And now what I want to do is just take this, scale it down, and put it off in the distance here where it could realistically be coming out of a cloud. There we go. And I'm going to add my own glow to it. And I'm going to do it once it's small so I can actually see how it's working. There we go. We'll do a slightly big one, and then we'll do a very big glow. There we go. Nice. Nice. Sometimes you got to double up an effect with different layers of it. to make it look really nice. And I'm going to go ahead and screen this over the top. And I'm going to do a little bit of animation with it. So I'm going to count off a couple frames, maybe 3 frames, and then I'm going to make a keyframe on my conductivity state. And I'm going to do a hold keyframe there. So now every keyframe I make after this, where I change the conductivity state, it'll just hold on that. 2, 3, and we'll go 2, we'll go 1, 2, 3, and we'll go 3, and 1, 2, 3, go 4, and 1, 2, 3, and then we'll cut it off. Cut off the lightning right there. All right, so let's go ahead and see how that looks. That looks pretty good. We don't have any light effects happening in the cloud itself, which we would normally see if there was a big piece of lightning. So I'm going to go ahead and create another adjustment layer. Call this the cloud light. And I'll have it be, and I'm going to go ahead and just create a nice soft little mask right here at the tip of the lightning into the cloud, something like that. And then I'm going to grab a brightness and contrast, and I'm just going to brighten it up a little bit and feather it out a little bit. Maybe expand the mask. There we go. And then I will go ahead, grab its opacity, and I'll set an expression here to wiggle, maybe 7, and let's say 50. Good amount of disturbance. Oops. 2 G's and wiggle. There we go. So let's up that wiggle amount. Let's double it. There we go. Now that feels a little more flashy. And now that I've got those two together, I can go ahead and duplicate it and just kind of do a little bit of offsetting here. And let's bring it over, and let's just change where the lightning is coming from a little bit. There we go, something maybe more like that. And we'll change our brightness area here to match. There we go. And I'll just add a third one. You can add as many of these as you like. And again, I'll just come in, move the source point a little bit, and maybe move the layers over so they're not exactly in the same place. So let's put that guy there. There we go. That looks pretty cool. And we'll move over our brightness contrast effect. I think maybe I'm going to pick it up a little more for this one. That looks pretty good, but I think I'd like to actually add one more layer of this light effect, and I'm going to kind of make it happen over the course of this whole thing. And I'm going to let it start there, and when it fades out, I'm going to actually bring it down a little bit. And I'm going to make this mask a little different. So I'm going to delete my original mask, and I'm going to kind of come in and maybe just pull out a larger area here. Something more like that. And maybe 100 pixel feather. And let's go ahead and bring this one up a little more. Oh, that's too much. Let's bring that back down. There we go. Now it feels like that light is passing through a larger part of the cloud. And that lightning is happening and generating from inside the clouds. There we go. Much more interesting. All right, so we've got a pretty close to done image here. I think I'm going to come back and just increase my contrast a little bit more. It's too much. There we go, something more like that. And I think I'm going to create one last adjustment layer. And I'm going to call this a letterbox. And I'm going to grab the letterboxer out of the Red Giant suite. And I'm just going to go 2, 3, 5. There we go. Just want this to feel a little more epic. But we're losing too much of that bottom. So I'm just going to pre-comp this guy. Call this the working comp. And just reframe a little bit. There we go. Now let's give it a preview. And there we go. I think if we just add some trucks off in the foreground chasing a giant semi, we would have our own Mad Max movie underway. So I think this is where we're going to leave off for this week. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've learned something you can use in your work. If you have any questions, you can always hit me up on Twitter or Facebook or down in the comments, or you can send me some mail at Fury Road. I've decided all of my mail from now on has to be delivered to Fury Road. And if you want to keep learning, there are more great tutorials and assets for you to use in your work at PixelBump.com. And I hope you'll join us next week when we're going to look at an effect from Tomorrowland. Thanks again for watching. Go and create.